Let us look at the second order differential equation with initial conditions. So now, for the first case, what we're going to do is we're going to find the characteristic equation, which is r squared plus 16 is equal to 0. Then you can easily see that r should be equal to plus or minus 4i. Then what this one tells us is that what we end up getting is y is equal to c sub 1 e to the 4i x plus c sub 2 e to the what? 4ix. And if you remember, e to the theta I is equal to cosine theta plus I sine theta. Then what we end up getting is here, we get c sub 3 cosine of 4x plus c sub 4 sine of 4x. So that's what we end up getting. But when you plug in pi over 4, we should get negative 3. So we get negative 3 is equal to c sub 3. And then when you plug in pi over 4, we get cosine of pi. And then plus c sub 4 sine of pi. But sine of pi is equal to 0. And cosine of pi is equal to negative 1. So we get negative 3 is equal to c sub 3 negative 1. So we get c sub 3 is equal to 3. Let's look at the next condition. When you take the derivative, now what we end up getting is y prime is equal to negative 4 c sub 3 sine of 4x, and then plus 4 c sub 4 cosine of 4x. When x equals pi over 4, then what we end up getting is the first one becomes 0, and we are left with the second one here. So we get 4 equals 4 c sub 4 times negative 1. Then you get to realize that c sub 4 must be equal to negative 1 as well. So therefore, our final answer becomes y equals 3 cosine of 4x rather, and minus sine of 4x. That becomes our final answer. Alrighty, let's move on to the next problem, number 23. So we're going to be looking at the characteristic equation as an r squared plus 2r plus 2 equal to 0. Then I can rewrite this one as r plus 1 squared equals negative 1, where r becomes negative 1 plus or minus I. So then what we end up getting is, this one tells us that our y is equal to e to the negative x, and c sub 3 sine x sine, let me write down cosine first in the same order as before. So we're going to have cosine of x plus c sub 4 sine of x. Now, when you plug in 0, I should be getting 2. So when I plug in 0, 2 equals e to the 0 power. And when you plug in 0, sine becomes 0, so leaving you with cosine of 0. Cosine of 0 equals 1, so we have c sub 3. Then you get c sub 3 is equal to 2. So that's what we end up getting. Let's try to get c sub 4. Now we have to take the derivative. So then what do we end up getting? Y prime becomes negative e to the negative x 2 cosine x plus c sub 4 sine of x. Now when you take the derivative of the inner portion, then we get plus e to the negative x, negative c sub 3. C sub 3 was equal to, in fact, 2. So we get negative 2 sine of x plus c sub 4 cosine of x. Now when you plug in 0 for x, then sines disappear. Then we get 1 equals negative 1, because e to the 0 power equals 1, negative 1 times 2 times cosine of 0 becomes 1, plus 1 times c sub 4, and then cosine of 0 equals 1, so multiply that by 1. Then you can see that 1 equals negative 2 plus c sub 4. So c sub 4 should be equal to 3. So then what we end up getting is, when you combine them together, our equation is y equals negative e to the x, and then 2 cosine of x plus 3 sine of x. And that becomes our answer for question number 23. Let's go for number 25. In this case, it's the same idea, but it's called boundary problems, because we the initial values that was given to us are the boundaries of the interval. So then, boundaries for this equation is valid. Then we get 4r squared plus 1 equal to 0. Then we get to realize that r must be equal to plus or minus 1 over 2i. Then what does that tell us? Y equals c sub 3 e to the x over 2. Since it's a complex number, we're going to simplify that. We get cosine of x, 1 half x, plus c sub 4 sine of 1 half x. Now when you plug in 0, then you know that this one disappears. So we get 3 equals c sub 3 times 1. So we get c sub 3 equals 3. So that's what we end up getting for the first one. How about when you plug in pi, this becomes pi over 2, that cancels away, so we get negative 4 equals c sub 4 times sine of pi over 2 becomes 1, so times 1. We get c sub 4 equals negative 4. Alright, so then what we end up getting is y equals 3 cosine of 1 half x, and then minus 4 sine of 1 half x. So that becomes our final answer. Alright, I'll see you later.